The last few episodes, we have been talking about imposter syndrome, faking it till you make it. What does that mean? And it's time to now dive deeper into developing a healthy relationship with failure. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about changing your relationship with failure, how you process the emotions, learn from your mistakes, and move forward in a way that gives you helpful information that makes you better. Because anybody who is at any level of success that you admire, I can guarantee you they have probably failed multiple times. And it's those people that are not trying to prevent failure that move forward the fastest and have the most success. So we're going to get into that. Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. You've built success, but now it feels like you're shackled to your business that you've created. Hiring isn't clicking, scaling revenue feels stuck, and instead of freedom, your business is running you. You're not average, and you're done tolerating it. That's why I invite you to take my alignment assessment at consciousedge.com/assessment. You share what's really happening. I personally review your answers and show you what's holding you back, so you can reclaim your time, grow your income, and finally use your success to live fully and unapologetically. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alicia St. Germain. I'm here with Jonathan Duggar.
Hey, everybody.
You always do that.
I just have to prove that I'm actually here.
And we are so happy to have you today. I am founder of the Conscious Edge, and I help women entrepreneurs increase their capacity so that they can hold more success. And Jonathan, you do a lot of corporate consulting, and you help with the same types of things, but at a lot of times a more organizational and corporate level, but a lot of the same things we talk about here on the podcast. Was there anything that you would add to that?
I do. I work a lot in groups and with companies to help them create mindful approaches to processes and platforms, and help with teams developing better approaches to communicating effectively and from a standpoint of what gifts they bring to the table, what skills they bring to the table, and maximizing those in the most efficient and effective way. And also in a fun way. Yeah. Bringing fun and joy into the workplace. I love what we were talking about when we were talking about where you wanted to go next year and what you were jumping into next year or had capacity for next year, really. And you were talking a little bit about how the corporate coaching and consulting world has evolved, where you used to feel like you had to do it in a very academic way, and you had to be very covert about bringing mindfulness into corporate settings, and how much more receptive a lot of companies are becoming, not all of them, but a lot more are becoming to the work that you're doing in mindfulness in the corporate setting. Yeah, that's very true. I probably, even 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, well, COVID did change a lot of things in a positive way from a corporate culture standpoint. But it was rare for me to use words like compassion or kindness in a corporate setting. I would change those. I would use similar concepts, but I would say collaboration and cohesiveness and things like that sound more like corporate speak. You hear language that is very, very personal in nature now in corporate settings, a lot more than you used to. Not across the board, but in ways that are pretty healthy, in my opinion. And mindfulness is something that, as you guys have all heard me advocate for so much, that is becoming recognized as a very powerful and practical tool in the workplace. So this next year is going to be interesting because so many companies have had to trim down their workforce, and the employees and those that are still left in the workplace are wearing multiple hats, and they're taking on roles that they've never performed before. I think it ties in greatly with this subject on failing and failure. So I do have some bandwidth and capacity for next year's for some new client base. And I'm very looking forward to bringing mindfulness into those workplaces in ways that can help expand and facilitate productivity and joy in the workplace and create compassionate and comfortable work environments, even though the stress level may be higher in some respect than it has been in the past. So I'm excited about those possibilities.
I love that. And while we talk so much about entrepreneurship, it's not for everyone. And I think that having really good environments where people can be in a work setting and feel good about it. I remember going through just different environments that I've been in. And when we think about failure and where these very unrealistic expectations we have of ourselves and the results that we create come from, I mean, it starts in early childhood with the way the schools are, I should say traditional school settings are run, where there's like one right answer and you got to get it right. And it all rests on this sort of type of way of being, I should say, and creates a lot of perfectionism. And then moving into corporate cultures where it's like you don't have any space to make a mistake because you could lose your job. And so there's no room for real growth. It's just always having to get it right. And it creates so much stress in our world, in our culture. And so I'm happy that those types of conversations are happening more and more in all settings. And it's really supportive. If you are new here, let me start by welcoming our new people here. We put these episodes out every single week, and we are really just giving you conversations that we have had for so many years behind closed doors, conversations that we're having with our clients, and bringing them to a public setting so that we can help more people. So if you enjoyed today's episode, I want to encourage you to hit subscribe or like from wherever you're listening. So let's get into this failure. I kind of framed it up there where I think it comes from, but we really want to redefine our relationship with failure as first attempt in learning. It's really a good way to get started there. So what was it that you wanted to really redefine or change about our relationship with failure and the way that we approach it?
This is probably a whole lecture series, training series around this subject. But I think the overarching or arcing, whatever the correct term is, concept I think that I would like to look at related to this subject while we talk through it today is how we have almost a biological imperative to take failure as a negative, not only a negative in the instance, but a negative state of being. And there's actually some really good neuroscience research out there that's been done with primates that shows even in I think it was done with chimpanzees at MIT a few years ago. And they were set up these tasks for these monkeys. And when a monkey would fail at a task, it became anxious and fearful. And this exact same task put in front of it again, it often would even avoid. It wouldn't even try and do it again, even if there was reward involved. But if a different monkey, was successful at that task, they were immediately engaged in a more difficult task right after. Without that was reward in and of itself. There was no food involved, no external reward necessary. So the whole thing that came out of that research was that we have some innate nature that when we fail incrementally, we fail just a little bit, immediately fear and anxiety comes in that holds us back from trying again, or even the same task, much less something that might be perceived as more difficult. So we may be fighting against some biology there too, where we need to use our brains and take some of the emotion out of it and look at the most effective way to be successful the next time. And that's part of where the change has to start taking place, is how do we start removing the immediate negative generalizing we may have around even a small failure and start expanding our reach in terms of the positive possibilities. Because if you look at, I can't remember who it was. I meant to look this up before we spoke today. I want to say it was Edison, but one of the inventors, he's like, if you ever feel like you were successful without failure, that's my definition of luck. Like, that doesn't happen without luck, basically, is what he was saying. He's like, true success is led by hundreds, if not thousands, of points of failure. And I agree with that.
And there's definitely I'm sure there's research out there that if you were to look at those people who had a higher tolerance for frustration and failure, that they created better results. And I think I have always taken one of the things we talked about was we oftentimes don't celebrate our successes as much as we beat up on our failures. That was something that you were talking about before we started recording. And I think about all the times, and it could be the smallest thing or it could be something big, but when I'm trying to figure something out, it's like I'm not going to let this thing get the better of me. I am going to figure this out. And I really do rise to that challenge, sometimes to a point where I have to say, okay, do I really have to get this? Or can I find an easier way around this? Because I will waste a lot of time on something because I'm like, this is not going to get the better of me, whatever it is. Yeah. And so I have to really stop myself and think, do I need to do this? But man, the satisfaction of figuring out something that you have been struggling at is so rewarding.
Well, and tracking back to, our conversations about the neurospicy brain, that's even more so because, our brains are so dopamine seeking, and success breeds big dopamine dumps. We can get incredibly frustrated to the point of actually strong emotions like anger coming in because we're not getting that. We're not getting our dopamine hit from whatever it is. And so we really have to literally rewire our brains to some degree to take the emotional drive out of it. And I meant to say this earlier, this overarching sort of concept, I'm calling it failing mindfully or mindful failure. So by practicing mindfulness in all these things we're going to talk through today, it gives us the opportunity to set in a place of curiosity and say, okay, even pick apart the frustration and say, what is it within me that's causing this strong emotion? And how do I shift that? What steps do I take to shift that? And it is really interesting when you can approach any of these things that kind of have a negative attribute associated with them in a curious way, it changes the energy completely. It does become motivating. And that's where we're rewiring our brains into, even those of us with neurospiciness, where the curiosity itself actually becomes a motivating piece. And our brains start like, oh, this might be something I want to focus on.
Yeah,
I might want to pay attention to. Yes, exactly. Exactly. What could this do? Ooh. Yeah, It's like that. So it becomes an experiment. It becomes a laboratory setting that can be fun, as opposed to so fear-driven. Because that is the biggest response. That's some other research that's been done. What's the emotion that people would identify associated with a failure? And it's fear.
Yeah. And that's where you get into the perfectionism, the imposter syndrome, all of those type things come in with that, trying to prevent failure. And I know when I like to wrap up kind of on the relationship of failure, and then I'll let you add anything that you need to. But I think for me, the thing that shifted, and I sometimes have to catch myself and remind myself if I'm really excited about something or maybe a little attached to something, is that so often we look at failure as an end point.
Yes.
And so very often failure is actually a starting point, or whatever it is that we're doing that we might be concerned about failure around. That thing is usually the starting point. Like if I'm just in the context of what I do, right? If I'm going to do a training, I might be like, oh my gosh, I did the training. I didn't get the result that I wanted. That's not the end point. That's actually the starting point for figuring out what to do next, or how to keep going, or how to carry it through. So,
yeah, but that is such a good example, though, of that rewiring that we have to work on and continue to work on, because we backslide in this all the time. And again, I think it has to do with some of our biology and neurology. But this just came to me. Think of this from a language standpoint. How many times have you screwed up minimally, something that's not life altering, and you in your head are in some format think or say, I'm a failure, I'm a screw up, I'm a whatever.
More so, I used to do that a lot, but
let's turn that around. Even now. So even now, after all the work, think about it in the opposite. You do something successfully. We almost never use the language, I'm a success.
Oh, yeah.
Or even acknowledge that I was successful. But we're very quick to go, I am a failure. Oh, I'm so stupid. How could I be so stupid? Well, I want everybody to start saying, man, I'm awesome.
Yeah. Well, I even said to you before we started recording, I said, oh my gosh, like, I think I've probably failed more than I've succeeded. And I was kind of saying it offhandedly, like, I'm very happy with, like, when I look at my life, I'm like, I love my life. I'm very happy. I have a lot of gratitude for where I am. And when I'm saying, I think I've failed more than I've succeeded, it's really to say that I've had a lot of disappointments and it's taken a lot of work to get to this point. And then I stopped for a second. I was like, I don't know, have I really failed more than I succeeded? Because if that was true, would I be this like content? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And that's where we were talking about, maybe we do need to like own our successes a little bit more.
Well, I mean, we did a whole retreat on redefining success.
Yeah.
And this is a big part of it, because, you need kind of the opposite to define the other. So we're talking about failure, and we're working to redefine failure, but we really need to be working in tandem with redefining success, because and making that very personal. We make failure very personal, but often we don't do the same thing with success. So I think it's super important from a language standpoint, just to kind of monitor yourself. That gives you insight into what's really going on in your backstory, your own back brain messaging that's going on all the time that you may not pay attention to on a conscious level. But when we say things like I'm trying to think of a really specific example. There's so many that I can't come up with one, but
I know yours is you should know better.
Yes. Especially if it's something around something that I'm a professional in. I have a hard time when I don't do that, because I don't know. I almost never use this word, but I think I can say it here. I hate hypocrisy and the appearance of hypocrisy. So when things don't align that way, as when it's unauthentic. So when there's something that I do and I feel like I should be an example of, and it doesn't happen, I am very quick to go to a place. Oh, you should know better than that. You've got the skills, you've got the practice, you should know better than that. And I almost never, even talking through this, I almost never do the opposite. I'm trying to get better at it. Like just we were talking about I was telling you about my walk today. I felt some success in something I achieved this morning. And I tried to tell myself, you're moving in the right direction. This is what you're trying to achieve. These are the things you're working on. This is good. This is good. Even if I don't take it necessarily as a self-compliment in that kind of way, put it in a platform of this is good.
Yeah.
This is good. Success. Check mark.
Yeah. You're so lit up around this. And it's so funny. I'm sitting here watching you talk and you're so animated. I don't know. I'm sure
I seem very Italian today, don't I?
The listeners can hear in your voice, but you spent a lot of time in nature this weekend and grounding this morning and had you made the statement, this is the most successful I have felt in my grounding and connecting to nature since moving away from my country atmosphere and into more of a city life and concrete jungle. Right. And so I can just see in your way of being here that you have this levity, and I can hear it in the tone of your voice even, which is so cool. So yeah, let's celebrate that success for sure.
It's timely because it's a great example of what we're talking through today, of how those tiny failures can sabotage an entire day or an entire process. In the professional environment, teams fall apart because of, I call them micro failures.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to work at using those incremental successes to bring cohesion, to bring teams together. You have to recognize it, put it as part of the process, because often what happens is even after a success, you're still anticipating failure. You'll hear language and we say it to ourselves, well, I'm not there yet. Don't celebrate too early.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's literal things we say inside and to each other. So, it's throw that out the door. And, the next part we're going to, I want to make sure that we're not being all Pollyanna on this, because that's not the point. The point is to, if nothing else, treat them equally.
Right.
If we're going to let failure screw us up so bad, at least let success fuel us forward.
I love that. All right. So we fail. Now we've got to process
Yes,
the emotion of it. So we fail. Let's go there. We fail. Now we've got to, if we're going to develop a healthy relationship with failure, this is not about toxic positivity. Like you said, we don't want to be Pollyanna. This is about acknowledging all the parts of failure, which means I might have some emotions around it, disappointment. And I think that that's part of why people, they will not celebrate even the small successes. They will only how many times someone says, well, I'm not going to say anything until the deal is complete, until the thing is signed, until it's in my hands. I don't want to sabotage it, right? So I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah. I caught myself this morning saying to somebody on the phone, I don't want to jinx that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to talk about it too soon. I don't want to jinx it.
Right.
That's that kind of language.
So now here you are putting, if we want to talk about it from an energetic standpoint, not celebrating that, because I want to move myself away from what I fear, jinxing it. So I'm not going to say anything, because if I don't say anything, then I'm not jinxing it, but you're putting the energy of jinxing it out into the world. So talk about really putting energy into something you don't want to happen. That's exactly what you're doing by not celebrating the successes. And I think the reason people don't celebrate their successes is because if I don't celebrate it, when it doesn't happen, it doesn't hurt so bad.
Yeah.
Because
exactly,
we haven't been taught overall as a society, we have not been taught how to process and handle what we might call negative emotions, as I give air quotes, like anger and sadness and frustration and grief. Mm-hmm. And those are considered bad emotions, which they're not. They're just
emotions. Strong emotions. Yeah.
And so when we process the emotions, what does that look like? A healthy way of processing an emotion. What does that look like?
So I think any strong emotion that creates biological changes in us, creates anxiety or happiness or whatever side of the spectrum we're talking about, is important to understand what feeds it, understand the source. So any emotional state, any emotion gives us the opportunity to learn more about ourselves and learn more about our environment. So that's the way failure and the emotions that surround failure need to be processed. And this is where, again, mindfulness comes in as such a useful tool to help us in a non-emotional way, in a non-judgment loaded way, look at our current state of being, look at the context around it, and figure out best approach, figure out next steps. The piece also that's, I think, so important in this, that we also, so I mentioned that failure, the most common emotional outcome is fear. Well, failure leads to fear, which leads to avoidance. So avoidant behavior is usually fueled by fear. So the way that we start making the shifts away from that is to truly determine what our responsibility, our real responsibility is in a failure situation. So that's often very emotionally driven. And that's the other thing about, like, this statement we were talking about earlier, how we generalize those statements and say, oh, I'm so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're not. You messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you had some part in that mess up. A defense mechanism is often go to blame. We externalize it. So it's everybody else's fault, or the situation's fault, or the weather's fault, or whoever else's fault. And some of that could be true. There's a difference between a reason and an excuse. Mm-hmm. So focus on the reason, and then focus on your true part in that process. Failure didn't just happen as circumstance most of the time. It has multiple components to it. So when we can do that in a way that's not judgment loaded, we can get to the part that we actually played in it. And that's when we can identify what we actually need to change.
Right.
It's like, okay, yes, I need some more learning in this area. I need to understand better what this role really is like. I need to get some more training, some more skills, some more collaboration, or some insight, or some coaching. Without that, we're kind of shooting in the dark as to what really could be the most effective for a positive change, for doing better next time.
So as you were talking, I was writing down some notes here. And so when I think about the healthy way of processing through the emotion, learning from it, owning your responsibility, I think that number one, being able to name what you're feeling. Yeah. And so if you're someone, I've mentioned this book before, but I think the best guidebook on learning how to name and understand an emotion would be Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. It's your guidebook to what you're feeling, essentially. And it also gives really good insight into, like, what's the source, kind of going underneath it. So it can help you name it. And I know this goes to mindfulness too, is I like to notice where my emotions come up in my body, because a lot of times my body will know before my brain does that I'm feeling something. So being able to start to notice where different emotions show up in my body is really helpful. And then I always ask myself, why do I feel that way? Why am I feeling this way? And then I start trying on. We always laugh because it's like, I'm a girl, right? So like, I got to try on my shoes. I got to try on the dress. Like I try on, like, is this emotion what it is? Is this why I feel this way? Okay. When I try that reason on, does that land? And so I'm literally in my mind going through and trying on different scenarios to see, why do I feel this way, or what's important? And that's when I'll get down to, oh, that was important. I feel the way that I feel, or I'm disappointed because this, either maybe it reminded me of something that has happened to me in my past, or this was really important to me because I was really hoping, maybe I was more attached to the outcome of a scenario than I should be. Like, being really attached to an outcome makes the stakes of failure so much higher than just looking at it as an experiment, like you were talking about early, being experimental. And then getting into and owning, maybe because either of my history or because of my attachment, I may have made some choices from fear. I may have made and taken some actions from fear that created an unwanted result, which is.
Yeah. And that's, that the self-sabotage, actually a big fuel for that sort of, I'm not going to call it a mindset, but that approach often is putting heightened responsibility and heightened importance on a particular outcome. And there's not anything wrong with, in a balanced way, for saying that one thing is more important than another, like giving priority to things. But when we put a level of importance that is catastrophic if it doesn't happen, that's when all this sort of, when we set ourselves up to fail. We set ourselves up to not be able to be as effective as we could be because we're being driven by fear of that failure.
I think another really good question to ask yourself is really around, am I participating in all or nothing thinking? Because so much of failure it is all or nothing, as opposed to varying degrees of like, this worked, this doesn't, now I'm going to refine.
Yeah. Yep. And if you ever see kids that are in situations that are frustrating for them, like I used to work a lot with children clinically that did have some learning challenges and may have been on the autistic spectrum. And it was not uncommon at all to see a child that was coloring in a coloring book or working on a piece of art, and something didn't go right. And they would take the entire piece of art and destroy it. And I've been guilty of that with writing, like writing something and I'll read it and it just sucks. It's not what I intended. And instead of finding what's right about it, there's probably some helpful, useful things in there, but I destroy it. It's gone.
Yeah.
I got to start all over. I've got to start from scratch. And that's what it is when I was talking about micro failures earlier. That happens in corporate settings and in small businesses all the time, where I've seen it where they've actually removed it, especially more in small businesses than even in big groups, but where somebody isn't as effective as maybe another person, the boss thinks they should be. So they say, well, we're going to remove you from that role. And we're going to try somebody else. It's like, they haven't even been given the opportunity to know what they could do better at. It's like, we go ahead and just the all or nothing, it's like, well, no, start over, do over.
You said you've seen entire teams eliminated and projects scrapped and eliminated. And really this is, sometimes you're just a tweak away from what you want, just a tweak away and you're just scrapping the whole thing. And
from a resource standpoint, it's hugely wasteful.
Yeah.
Because instead of processing, we're going to this one next, but what do we learn from this? It's just like, we got to start all over. It's like, no, you don't. You failed up. You failed, but you're moving in the right direction. So where does this leave us? Where do we go from here instead of start all over, start from scratch?
So when we think about the learning piece as well, it's like, what worked and what didn't? I'm really big on that. What worked and what didn't? And what do we want to test next?
And even, my thing, where's the gift in that? Well, where's the lesson in that? Because often it's not even learning that's going to lead us in the path of success. It's learning on what we don't want to do, what we don't want to replicate, what we're going to remove from the system, what we're going to remove from the equation, or redistributing of resources. On teams, often it's, this person is an amazing organizer. They have systems built into their head. They see how the pieces fit together. And we didn't know that until we screwed up. We figured that out as it's like, oh, they had that all in a spreadsheet. Well, they need to be in charge of whatever that's directly related to that skill set. So it's often the discovery piece that we would never have gotten to without the failure.
Right.
I think there's a book called Failing Up.
I'm sure if there isn't, someone write
there
it.
Should be.
Yes, there should be.
Write that down. I want that. I want
you
that term.
That one. So and it's our character is not decided in everything that goes right. I think our character is really decided in everything that happens and how we react when things go wrong. So if you really want to grow as a person, failure And things going wrong is where it happens. It doesn't happen in everything going right. So I have so much learned that I'm on the edge of a breakthrough, or if you want to call it that, I'm on the edge of some kind of profound growth when I am at my most frustrating moments, is what I think, how I would say that. So then the other thing that you talked about or wanted to talk about, and I do this too, I didn't even realize I naturally do this, but I was shocked to hear that when you plan for worst case scenario, you've been called out for being negative.
Yeah. Oh, many times actually.
I find that just shocking.
Yeah.
So we're all just going to put on rose colored glasses and leave this very ambiguous sort of no, I don't want to. Do you think that comes from some of the manifestation practices and the abundance practices where it's oh, I don't want to talk about something negative because what if I call it in?
That could be part of it. I think it's more a form of avoidance behavior. It's oh, we don't even want to talk about that. We don't even want to consider the possibility of failure, especially failure at that level. So just to give a little framework around this, so Alicia and I have talked about this before. So one of the ways that I deal with my own fear and anxiety of failure is that I almost always start from worst case scenario. So I get into, let's say, a new property deal, a new real estate deal. And I was like, what would this look like if my whole mobile home park goes vacant in 6 months? I raise lot rents, everybody leaves. Well, 99.99999% of the time, that would never happen. But if I can figure out a strategy to deal with that, if I can get comfortable with the worst possible scenario, everything else is cake. Everything else is, well, I've already dealt with the worst thing that could happen. So, it is a form of coping mechanism for myself. And it may not work the same way for everybody, but I've seen it very effective in group planning. If we can start there, everything else seems to come easier. It's sort of like it generates this level of creativity because you've stretched the capacity to its furthest on the bad side, on the screw up side, or on the not chaos, on the worst possible thing that could happen scenario.
Yeah. And I do the same thing. And I ask myself, okay, worst case scenario, what's the worst case scenario of what could happen? And then what would I do if it did? And am I okay with that? And I will never forget sitting on a women's panel with Kim Kiyosaki years ago and explaining that to someone. We were sitting on a panel and someone came up and they asked the question, how do I deal with this? And I said, well, I just asked myself, what's the worst that can happen? What would I do if it did? And am I okay with that? If I'm not okay with it, that tells me what my risk tolerance is for failure. And if I am okay with it, then great, let's do it because I'm okay with the consequences of my actions. And in the opposite side of those consequences is that I might actually have something positive come out of it too, right? And it's actually often more likely that something positive comes out of it than your worst fear. Because the thing that you're most afraid of, there's actual studies that show the thing that you're most afraid of happening, oftentimes, I think there's a less than 3% chance of it happening. And of that 3% chance of it happening, it also ends up not being even that bad.
Yeah.
And it's not that people couldn't recover. So very slim chance that it would be the most devastating thing ever in the world. So I just offer that up to say, let's be real. If you really want to stay stuck, yeah, go ahead, keep buying your story. But if you want to get out of the fear and anxiety and the fear of failure, then deal with it, talk yourself through it with it, and then be okay with the consequences.
And come up with a realistic plan. Even if it's a plan of, I have to completely change direction. I have to start again. If this worst thing happened, it's a plan though. And there's something about attaching to, we know we have an alternative, that is hugely empowering. And it does help balance out those often irrational fears, fears that have no founding at all. So, and you'll even see that in business settings where so one of the things that I will do sometimes in business settings is I'll facilitate strategic planning groups. And I'll take this approach sometimes where it's like, we're going to start with a place of, what are we afraid of? What are we afraid of? And it really is sort of that worst case scenario. And it is amazing, even with seasoned in businesses that have been long-standing, having seasoned employees or even owners that will verbalize, well, we know this could happen. We've seen this happen. It's like, when? 1922? It's like, in my head, I sometimes have to hold myself in check not to laugh, because sometimes they're so extreme and irrational. But it's important to know that that's fuel that's causing avoidant behavior, that's causing derailing of success, because it's being fueled by something that's fear-based. So this does help give us the opportunity to step towards success out of a place that was being fueled by fear, when you are able to come up with strategy to handle worst possible thing.
Yeah, strategy. And then sometimes, like I said, with risk tolerance level, that's a question that I sometimes get is, how do I know what my risk tolerance is? Yeah. Well, what are you not willing to talk? Like, what would keep you up at night? And sometimes having a certain amount of money in the bank for if things go wrong, or having certain safeguards, or sometimes I call them guardrails, in place, makes it feel more safe. But all that being said, we're already at time. So the last thing that you wanted to share today.
And this ties back to something you said very early in our conversation, is don't give up. Know in your heart of hearts that the most successful people on the planet, and maybe you want to study them, maybe you want to read Richard Branson's biography, or Oprah's biography, or Albert Einstein's biography. The most successful person that you can come up with in your head, they failed over and over and over again. And they may have had successes along the way and then failed some more. But they failed up because they didn't give up. Yep. So I'll leave that with you.
I love that. So with all that being said, I'm sending you so much love.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes, and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.